So, here we are. It's late or early or somewhere in the middle of the night, where the distinction between the two stops mattering quite so much. And I've been thinking about Spider-Man, which, if I'm honest, is not unusual for me. There's something about that particular corner of the Marvel Universe that pulls me back when it's quiet, and the rest of the day has finally stopped making noise. Not the action, not the set pieces, not even the multiverse stuff, though we'll get to all of that. More the texture of the thing, the specific, slightly scuffed quality of a superhero story that keeps insisting on being set in Queens, rather than a tower, or a palace, or a galaxy far away. Queens. That's the detail that matters. New York, obviously, but not the New York of billboards and skyscrapers and montages of Times Square. The New York of a teenager who takes the subway to school and does his homework before going out to stop muggings. A neighbourhood. Somebody's actual neighbourhood, with corner shops and graffiti and buses that smell like they've had a complicated life. That's where Spider-Man lives, and that grounding is, I think, what makes the whole thing work in a way it wouldn't otherwise. You can make a story about a god from another realm feel important. It's harder to make it feel real. Spider-Man feels real, or at least it does at this time of night. If you're new to this channel, hello, welcome. This is what I do. Long, slow, wandering lore content, mostly about fictional universes I find myself thinking about when I should probably be sleeping. I've got a few of these made for Marvel already, if that's your thing. But you don't need any of it for tonight. We're just here for Spider-Man. If you've seen every film a dozen times, brilliant. Hopefully there's something here that catches you from a new angle. If you've only seen some of them, or none of them, that's genuinely fine too. I'll explain what needs explaining. Nothing tonight is a test. And if you're already half gone, good. That's exactly where you're supposed to be. A quick subscribe is always welcome if you're enjoying this kind of thing. I make these fairly regularly, and there's quite a lot more planned, but no pressure. Just settle in. So, Peter Parker. The thing that keeps drawing me back to Peter Parker specifically, rather than Spider-Man as an icon or a brand or a franchise, is that the EMCU version of this character has one of the most complete arcs in the whole interconnected universe. And it's a quiet arc, mostly. It doesn't end with him wielding infinite power or making a speech to a crowd or retiring to a farm somewhere. It ends with him alone in a small apartment, sewing a suit by hand, choosing to go back out into a city that doesn't know his name. That's the destination. Everything else is the road that gets you there. Tonight we're going to walk that road slowly. We'll start before the bite, or rather, the MCU skips the bite, which is actually one of its more interesting choices, and we'll talk about why. We'll spend some time with the suits, which are a better map of Peter's inner life than almost anything else in the films. We'll get into the relationship with Tony Stark, which is the emotional engine of the whole trilogy, even after Tony's gone. And then we'll get into the villains. The Vulture, who is the best Spider-Man villain in the MCU, and doesn't always get credit for it. And Mysterio, who is the most thematically appropriate villain for a post-Tony Peter. And then the entire somewhat extraordinary situation of No Way Home, where the multiverse cracks open and 3 different Spider-Men from 3 different universes end up in a room together, comparing notes on grief. And we'll talk about the people around Peter. Ned, who is possibly the perfect best friend in all of superhero cinema, which is a strong claim, but I'm comfortable making it. MJ, whose intelligence and emotional perceptiveness the films deploy gradually and quietly until you realise she's actually the steadiest person in the room. Aunt May, whose MCU version is quite different from other adaptations and is better for it. Happy Hogan, who is reluctant about all of this the whole time and keeps showing up anyway. We'll get there, all of it, without any particular rush. This isn't a countdown. There's no payoff being built toward. We're just spending some time in a universe that rewards that kind of attention. The slow kind, the kind you do when it's late and you're not trying to accomplish anything. One thing I find genuinely interesting about Spider-Man As a concept, before we even get into the specific story the AMCU tells, is what he represents compared to the other heroes in this universe. Tony Stark is defined by genius and money, and the specific combination of arrogance and guilt that produces. Steve Rogers is defined by principle and duty and the weight of being a symbol. Thor is, famously, a god. But Peter Parker is just a kid from Queens who is very clever and very good at chemistry, and who cannot walk past an injustice without trying to do something about it. The powers are almost beside the point. There's a version of Peter Parker without the spider bite who still ends up trying to do the right thing on a Tuesday when nobody's watching. Because that's what he is. The powers just gave him better tools. The EMCU understands this, which is why the films work. They're not really about a spider-powered superhero. They're about a particular kind of person, the kind who keeps getting up, who finds it literally impossible to stop caring even when caring costs everything. The powers are the frame. The character is the painting. One thing that helps with this actually, unlike most MCU stories, this one is short enough to hold in your head all at once. The Avengers story spans a decade of film time. Thor has been going since 2011. Spider-Man's MCU chapter, at least this one, is contained 3 main films, a handful of appearances in others. You can see the whole shape of it. The circle it draws from Queens to Queens, from homemade to homemade, lands properly when you can hold all 3 films in the same thought. That's a rare thing in franchise storytelling, and it's worth appreciating at this hour, when holding things whole is exactly what you want to do. Right, let's start from the beginning, or rather, from where the MCU starts, which is already in the middle of things. The first interesting decision the MCU makes about Spider-Man is to skip his origin entirely. No spider bite, no Uncle Ben dying in an alley. No, with great power comes great responsibility, delivered as a lesson by an older, wiser man. We don't see any of that. Instead, the first time we meet Peter Parker, he's already Spider-Man. He's been at it for a few months. He's filmed himself on a phone during patrols. He's got a workable homemade suit and a set of web shooters he built himself from scratch, presumably between homework and dinner, in a bedroom that looks like it has approximately 40 square feet of usable floor space. He's 15 years old, and he's absolutely buzzing about the fact that Tony Stark has just knocked on his door. That's where we enter. Not at the beginning, in the middle, and I think that's a deliberate choice that pays off across the whole trilogy, because it forces you to ask, who was Peter Parker before any of this? What made him the person who, given extraordinary abilities, immediately decided to use them to help people? The films don't answer this directly. They imply it. So let's think about it. Peter lives in Queens with his Aunt May. His parents are gone. The EMCU doesn't dwell on this, but they're absent, and have been for long enough that it's simply the shape of his life rather than an active wound. May is the MCU's version of the character, which is to say she's younger than most people's mental image of Aunt May, warmer in a specific kind of way, more of a partner to Peter than a caretaker. Marisa Tomei plays her with an energy that makes her feel like someone Peter can actually talk to rather than someone he has to protect from the truth. She finds out he's Spider-Man off-screen between the first and second films, apparently, and the moment where Peter realises she knows is played as a relief rather than a catastrophe, which tells you something about who she is. Uncle Ben, meanwhile, is the great absent presence of the whole trilogy. He's mentioned exactly once, briefly, obliquely. Peter says, "When you said I could make mistakes, there was this one time," and then stops himself. That is the only explicit, on-screen reference to Uncle Ben in the trilogy. But Ben's influence is there in everything Peter does, because the defining characteristic of this Peter Parker, the one that was clearly already present before the bite, before any of it, is that he cannot pass a wrong thing without trying to make it right. Even when he's 15, even when he's outmatched, even when it costs him something. There's a detail in the first Homecoming film that I keep coming back to, when Tony Stark shows up in Queens to recruit Peter for the airport fight in Civil War. Peter films the whole thing on his phone. Just films it. The way a teenager who has never had anything this big happen to him would film it, thinking about the memory even while living it. He's documenting the most significant day of his life in real time because some part of him already understands that this is the kind of thing you're going to want to be able to look back at. That's not someone who takes anything for granted. That's someone who grew up knowing that good things were fragile and you held on to them while you had them. Midtown School of Science and Technology, Midtown Tech, in the film's shorthand, matters as a setting, not just as background. It's a selective school, competitive, full of genuinely clever people, and Peter is near or at the top of it academically. He and Ned compete in academic decathlon. He builds complex machinery in his bedroom for fun. He understands things quickly, makes connections between disparate ideas, has the kind of mind that sees the solution before it's fully formed. That's not background detail. That's the same mind that will later reverse engineer alien weapons technology, synthesize cures for 5 different transformed humans, and trap Mysterio using his own drone system. The intelligence is the through line. Ned Leeds is Peter's best friend, and we'll give Ned his proper time later in the evening. But the friendship is a specific kind of presence in Peter's life, someone who engages with Peter's whole self, not just the parts that fit neatly into a social category. Ned is enthusiastic about the things Peter is enthusiastic about. He builds Lego Millennium Falcons at enormous scale. He's not cool by the school's internal definition of the word, and he doesn't seem particularly interested in becoming cool. He and Peter are a unit, and the ease of that friendship says something about Peter's social landscape at Midtown Tech. He's not popular exactly, but he's not unhappy. He has the things he actually needs. MJ is a different kind of presence. Her first appearance in Homecoming is deliberately understated. She's in the background of scenes, making dry observations nobody asked for, reading books about traumatic historical events for what appears to be recreational interest. "I don't have any friends," she says at one point, and the delivery is so flat that it takes a moment to figure out whether she's sad about this or just reporting it as a fact she's made peace with. It's the latter mostly. MJ is someone who has built a very specific kind of self-sufficiency around her and doesn't necessarily feel its absence as a loss until she does. But that's later. The school trip scenes, the academic decathlon competitions, the lunch table dynamics, all of this stuff exists in the Spider-Man trilogy to create a specific texture. Peter Parker is a recognizable kind of teenager. Clever, a bit awkward in social situations that require a kind of easy confidence he doesn't have. Genuinely enthusiastic about things in a way that the cooler people at school have learned to suppress in themselves. His excitement about being Spider-Man is a version of the same energy. He can't help it. He doesn't really try. And underneath all of it, the school stuff, the Ned friendship, the halting attempts to talk to MJ, there is this other life happening. The nighttime life, the patrols, the web slinging, the stopping of bikes being stolen, and muggings outside off-licenses and whatever else happens in Queens on a Wednesday at 11 p.m. The early Homecoming patrol montage plays it for light comedy, and it is light comedy, but it's also a portrait of someone who has decided, without a great deal of fanfare, that having the ability to help people obligates him to help people. He's not performing heroism. He's just doing what seems obviously correct to him. That's the person who exists before Tony Stark shows up. Before the fancy suits, before the Avengers, before any of the larger MCU machinery starts running through his life. A kid in Queens who made his own web shooters and goes out at night because not going out seems worse. One more detail that doesn't get mentioned often. In Civil War, when Tony confronts Peter about the suit, Peter explains why he does it. When you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you. That line is the moral DNA of the whole character. It's also the line that eventually costs him everything when he chooses to live by it at full commitment in No Way Home. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The spider bite, when it happened, off-screen before the films begin, didn't make Peter Parker, it gave him tools. The person was already there, something worth sitting with. The academic decathlon subplot in Homecoming is not just a school life detail. The competition takes the team to Washington, D.C., where the Washington Monument trip goes wrong in ways that put Ned and some classmates in a very precarious lift situation at the top of the monument, and Peter has to leave the decathlon building to go deal with it. The other team members notice he's gone. The coach is furious. The competition goes on without him. Peter makes it back in time for the final question, catches the answer, wins the thing, and then the suit makes an announcement through its speakers at maximum volume about a weapon situation in the area. That's his life. That's always his life in this period. The superhero problem and the civilian problem existing simultaneously in the same moment, requiring the same person to split their attention. Most adults struggle to do one job well. Peter Parker is doing two, and one of them occasionally results in him clinging to the side of the Washington Monument by his fingertips, while a government drone tries to remove him from federal property. And he is somehow fine. He's not coping with this in a way that is clearly unsustainable. He's adapting. He's always been adaptable. That quality is present before the bite, in the way he navigated being a small sick kid who got into fights he couldn't win and kept getting into them anyway. The physical limitations changed. The instinct to adapt around them didn't. Peter's neighborhood is worth lingering on briefly, because the texture of Queens in these films is one of the things they get genuinely right. It's not wealthy. The apartment is small. The hallways of the building are cramped and slightly scuffed. The people on the street are the full variety of people that New York actually contains, which is different from the slightly cleaned-up New York of many superhero stories. When Peter swings through the neighborhood on patrol, looking for bikes being stolen, stopping a woman being followed, helping someone who's locked out of their car, it feels proportionate to the setting. It's a neighborhood Spider-Person for a neighborhood. The scale is right. The detail that Happy Hogan doesn't respond to Peter's texts for the entire first two-thirds of Homecoming is, in retrospect, one of the film's funnier running gags, and one of its more accurate observations about what it's like to be a teenager trying to get an adult to take you seriously. Peter is diligent. He sends detailed updates. He flags concerns. He asks questions. Happy has read receipts turned off, apparently. The gap between what Peter is doing and what the Avengers infrastructure is able to care about in that moment is played for comedy, but it's also true. Peter's problems, from the outside, look local. From the inside, they're everything. By the time Homecoming ends, Peter has handled his local problem entirely without the Avengers infrastructure backing him up. He declined their formal offer of membership. He went back to Queens. He's back on the streets on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday evening, stopping ordinary crimes with a homemade suit and a specific inability to walk past something wrong. That's who he was before anything elevated him, and it's who he still is when everything else is stripped away. The foundations hold. There's a version of the Spider-Man trilogy where you could tell the whole story just by looking at the suits. Not reading the scripts, not tracking the plot, just here is what Peter Parker is wearing at this point, and here is what that tells you about where he is. It's a better map than you might expect. The first suit we see, the one from before Homecoming, the one Peter is wearing when Tony Stark shows up, is a red hoodie, blue tracksuit bottoms, a pair of goggles bought from what looks like a bargain shop, and the web shooters. That's it. There's a modified lens on the goggles to help him manage his enhanced senses, because even at this stage, Peter is solving practical problems practically. The suit is homemade because it has to be. He's a kid from Queens. There's no R&D budget. There's no manufacturing department. There's a sewing machine, probably, and whatever materials he could source. And here's the thing. It works. The homemade suit works. It's not comfortable, and it's not advanced, and it was absolutely not impressive. But Peter has been using it to stop crime in Queens for months, and it has functioned. That's worth registering, because the film uses it as a symbol of limitation, when really it's a symbol of competence. This kid built something that functions from nothing, And it's enough. Then Tony Stark shows him the new suit. And oh, the new suit. The Stark suit is everything. Red and blue properly. A sophisticated AI that Peter names Karen, named by him, importantly, not by Tony. And the name he picks is so thoroughly normal that it's funny. An instant messaging system. Reconnaissance mode. Interrogation mode. A total of 576 different web combinations Peter has never been told about and discovers by asking. Training wheels mode, which Tony has enabled without mentioning, which locks out all the most dangerous functions and which Peter very quickly turns off by hacking his own suit, which Tony has almost certainly anticipated. There's something almost parental about the way Tony builds in the training wheels, and something very Peter Parker about the fact that disabling them is the first real bit of engineering he does with the suit. The Stark suit is significant for another reason though. It's external. It's not Peter's. He didn't build it. He doesn't fully understand it. He wears it, but he doesn't own it in the sense that matters, which becomes very clear when Tony takes it back. The ferry scene. Peter has gone after Toombs's weapons operation without authorization. The situation has escalated badly. The Staten Island ferry is splitting in half, with hundreds of passengers on board, and Peter is holding the two halves together with webs that are not rated for this kind of load. Tony arrives, Iron Man, and saves the day, and then he lands, and he is absolutely furious, and he removes the suit. He literally takes it off Peter, leaves him standing there in his own clothes on a beach while Tony flies away. "I'm nothing without the suit," Peter says, panicking. "If you're nothing without the suit, then you shouldn't have it," Tony says, and flies off. There's a reading of this that's harsh. Peter has just saved 100 people, and Tony is telling him he's inadequate. But there's another reading. Tony knows what Peter is capable of. He's seen it. The line isn't an accusation, it's a challenge. It's also, I suspect, a line Tony has said to himself, or needed someone to say to him at some point in his own story. Because Tony Stark also spends a significant portion of his own life believing he is nothing without the suit. This is a man who built the first version of the thing in a cave to stay alive, and then never fully stopped. What Peter does next is the proof of the thesis. He goes after Toombs anyway. In a cotton onesie and his old goggles, with no AI and no 576 web combinations, and no training wheels to disable, because there are no training wheels. He finds Toombs, he fights the Vulture, he gets buried under a collapsing building, and digs himself out, and he wins. Not cleanly, not impressively. He wins through stubborn refusal to stop moving forward. And the moment in the rubble where he's pinned and he looks at his own reflection in the water and something shifts in him, that's the moment the suit stopped being his identity and became his tool. Tony offers Peter the suit back at the end of Homecoming, along with formal Avengers membership. Peter turns it down. He says he wants to stay the friendly neighborhood Spiderman, and there's something genuine and considered in the way he says it rather than starstruck. He's figured something out. The film ends with him back in his homemade suit, and it doesn't feel like a downgrade. It feels right. Then Infinity War happens, and Peter ends up in space in his new Stark nanotech suit, the Iron Spider, it's sometimes called, which is spectacular. Gold and red, mechanical spider legs that extend for combat, nanotech construction that deploys around his body. It's the most advanced piece of technology Peter has ever worn, and he's wearing it on an alien spaceship while helping Doctor Strange fight the children of Thanos, which is quite a lot to process. He doesn't get long with this one. He dissolves in it on Titan, apologising to Tony. The suits Peter wears in Far From Home are worth a moment. There's a stealth suit, black, provided by Nick Fury, which Peter wears during the Prague operation, and which he clearly hates. He looks wrong in it. It's not his colour scheme, literally, and that matters more than it should because the colour scheme is part of the identity. Then there's the red and black suit he builds himself later, with Stark's resources, after he's been hit by a train in the Netherlands and left alone, and confused in a police station in a foreign country with nothing. He designs it himself, he builds it himself. It's not quite as raw as the original, but it is his, and the first time he wears it, you can see the difference. He moves differently, more confident, more settled, and then No Way Home, and then the ending of No Way Home, which I'll leave fully for its proper section. But the final suit is worth naming here, hand-sewn, homemade Queen's Winter. The same idea as the beginning, but informed by everything in between. This one isn't a first attempt at something he can't yet do well. This one is a deliberate choice made by someone who knows exactly what the alternative looks like and has decided this is better. The wheel has turned full circle, and the point is that it means something different arriving at the same place the second time. There's a smaller detail in the suit history I find satisfying. The goggles. The original goggles in the homemade suit had a lens mechanism to help Peter manage his enhanced senses, to narrow the input when everything is too loud and too bright. Tony built this into the Stark suit. The way the eyes on the suit widen and narrow is the same mechanism made sophisticated. The homemade suit at the end of No Way Home presumably has it too, rebuilt from scratch. The continuity of that single practical detail across the whole trilogy is the kind of thing you can miss entirely and still get the story, but knowing it makes the story feel more real. Peter Parker has always been managing this specific problem. He solved it at 15 with goggles from a shop. He's been solving it in more or less the same way ever since. The suits are the story of someone figuring out the difference between having something and being something. The Stark suit is having. The homemade suit at the end is being. Neither version of Peter Parker is lesser. They're just at different points on the same line. The AR in the Stark suit has a detail I keep coming back to. Peter names her Karen, which is a completely normal name for a person, and a slightly unexpected name for an advanced artificial intelligence system built by the most sophisticated technology company in the MCU. Tony's AI systems have historically been named things like Jarvis and Friday, elegant, initialism-based, slightly impersonal. Karen is just a name. Peter picked a person's name because he talks to Karen the way he'd talk to a person, and the suit responds in kind. Karen gives him advice. Karen maintains a kind of gentle running commentary on situations as they develop. When Peter is trying to work up the nerve to talk to Liz, Karen suggests an interrogation mode, which is absolutely not what he was asking about. She offers anyway. The relationship between Peter and the suit's AI is one of the small good details of Homecoming that doesn't get talked about enough. It's not a plot point. It doesn't drive anything. It's just the texture of what it's like for a teenager to suddenly have a very advanced piece of machinery that is also, in some ways, company. He's alone quite a lot. The suit talks to him, he talks back. That's something. There's also the question of what the Stark suit physically represents in the context of the EMCU more broadly. By the time of Homecoming, the suit Peter is given is already several generations of Stark technology, advanced from what most people have access to. The material science alone, the development of lightweight, flexible, protective fabric at the scale Stark Industries produces it, is a significant achievement. The web shooters Peter builds himself are impressive. The suit Tony provides is from an entirely different order of engineering. The gap between what a brilliant 15-year-old can produce in his bedroom and what a billionaire genius with a global manufacturing infrastructure can produce is, it turns out, quite large. What this means in practical terms is that Peter spent the early part of his career with web shooters that run out of fluid at critical moments. There's a sequence in the second act of Homecoming where one web shooter clicks empty mid-swing and he has to improvise very quickly, and a suit that can be damaged by ordinary things. His vulnerability in that period is real. He can be hurt. He can run out of resources. The powers are extraordinary, but the support infrastructure is not. The Stark suit changes that, and then he gets the Stark suit taken away, which is the film reminding you that the vulnerability was the authentic version. I think about the nanotech suit from Infinity War occasionally, the Iron Spider armor, mostly because of how briefly Peter gets to use it before everything goes wrong. He sees it for the first time on an alien ship while the situation is actively dire, and his response is exactly what you'd expect from this Peter Parker. He's impressed visibly, and he's also immediately practical about what it can do and how to use it. He deploys the spider arms. He adapts to the new capabilities in real time, and then the snap happens and the suit dissolves with him. Whatever Tony built into that version, however far the technology had come, it ends in dust on Titan. The suit comes back in Endgame, briefly, and Peter wears it during the final battle. He and Tony exchange a look. There is speech between Peter and Tony in that moment. The look carries everything. And then the homemade suit at the end of No Way Home, hand-stitched in a small apartment in winter, is the suit that carries nothing of Tony in it and everything of Peter. That's the right ending for this particular thread. Nobody in the MCU ever uses the word. Tony doesn't say it. Peter doesn't say it. The films don't draw a line under it and announce, here is the surrogate father. Here is the surrogate son. Watch how this goes. Instead, it's just there, underneath everything, operating as the emotional architecture of 3 films and a few very significant moments in others. You either see it or you don't. But once you see it, it's impossible to unsee. Let's start at the beginning of the relationship, which is Tony Stark turning up unannounced in Queens with a camera crew he dismisses, so he can have a conversation with a 15-year-old in private. He's already done the research before he arrives. He knows about the YouTube videos of Spider-Man. He knows Peter is the kid behind them. He's made an assessment of Peter's capability and his character, and he's decided this is the person he wants. He doesn't consult anyone about this. He just shows up. That's very Tony, the unilateral decision, the assumption that his read on a situation is correct, the confidence that what he's offering is obviously the better option. And he's right, his read is correct. But the way he does it, the lack of process, the slightly brusque charisma, that's a man who doesn't entirely know how to extend warmth directly and finds it easier to show up with something useful instead. He gives Peter the suit. He sends Happy Hogan as a liaison. He tells Peter to check in with Happy if anything significant comes up, and then he's largely unavailable. Happy is unavailable. Peter texts Happy constantly. We see the number of unanswered texts accumulating on screen across Homecoming in a detail that is both funny and, if you let it land, a little sad. He's a kid who was told he had a mentor and the mentor isn't responding to messages. This is not a criticism of Tony, particularly. It's a portrait of a man who made a choice he perhaps didn't fully think through and who is dealing with rather a lot of other things. He's running a globally significant technology organization and managing the collapse of his relationship with Steve Rogers and building a new AI system and generally doing what Tony Stark does, which is operating at maximum capacity on 12 fronts simultaneously. Peter is not low priority to him, but Peter's problems are small scale, local, and easily filed under he can handle it in a mental cabinet that Tony doesn't open very often. The ferry is where this becomes explicit. Tony arrives and saves the day, and then he is so furious that you can see, if you look, that the anger is partly fear. Peter nearly got people killed. Peter nearly got himself killed. And Tony's angry in the specific way of someone who realizes they care more than they've admitted to themselves. He takes the suit and he leaves. And the words he says over his shoulder, "If you're nothing without the suit, you shouldn't have it," are not kind exactly, but they're not careless either. There's something Tony has worked out, and he's transferring the working out to Peter in the only way he knows how. By the end of Homecoming, when Tony realizes what Peter has done in his homemade suit, tracked tombs, stopped the heist, dragged the Vulture out of a burning crash even though the Vulture had just tried to bury him, he comes back with a proper suit and a formal offer of Avengers membership. And there is a pride in his face in that scene that he doesn't name. He's not the kind of person who names things. He just shows up with the better version of the thing and lets the gesture speak. Peter turning down the membership is the right choice, and Tony knows it's the right choice, and that's why he's smiling when Pepper takes the photo. Then comes Infinity War, and the dynamic shifts in a way nobody asked for. Peter is on the school bus when the alien ship arrives in New York. He sees it through the window. He knows what it is. He knows he should go. Tony is already up there. Tony is already fighting, and Peter follows him onto the ship, uninvited, using a parachute made of his own suit, landing on what is effectively a spacecraft currently travelling away from Earth. I'm not going to stop. So we might as well both be here, Peter tells Tony, more or less. Tony is furious. Tony also gives him a much better suit immediately, because Tony always has the better version ready, and because this is how he expresses the thing he won't say. The Titan sequence, where the plan almost works, where they almost get the gauntlet off Thanos, where everything falls apart at the last possible moment, is the last time Peter and Tony work together. And then the snap. And then Peter is in Tony's arms, apologising. And the thing about that scene is that Peter is apologising to Tony specifically, not to anyone, to Tony, because that's the relationship that matters in this moment. He doesn't want to leave Tony. He doesn't want Tony to have to watch this. Tony watching the ash, sitting in the rubble, not screaming, not even crying immediately, just sitting with the empty space. That's a man who has just lost someone he loved. The gap between Infinity War and Far From Home is 5 years, which Peter spends as dust. When he comes back in Endgame, Tony has a daughter and a house by a lake, and something resembling peace. In Avengers Endgame, Tony makes the last unilateral decision. He refuses to erase the last 5 years of his daughter's life, and risks everything he's built because it's the right thing to do. Tony dies using the gauntlet. Peter is there. Peter watches it. Far From Home is set in the immediate aftermath of this. And what the film is actually about, under the Europe trip, and the fake monsters, and the deception, is Peter trying to grieve Tony while the world is already asking him to be the next one. Edith, the glasses. Tony left him, the acronym supposedly standing for Even Dead I'm the Hero, which is either touching or absolutely insufferable, depending on your reading of Tony Stark, probably both, gives Peter access to a global satellite system and a drone fleet. It's Tony's entire infrastructure handed to a teenager. On one level, it's a gift. On another level, it's an enormous amount of pressure wearing the shape of a gift. Quentin Beck understands this perfectly, which is part of what makes him work as a villain. He positions himself as the experienced adult who can handle what Tony built. He's the mentor figure Peter needs, except he isn't, except Peter can't tell yet. There's a detail in Far From Home that I think about. When Peter asks Tony in a vision, in the illusion Beck constructs to torment him, when that version of Tony says he needs Peter to be the next Iron Man, Peter can't answer. He doesn't know if he wants that. He doesn't know if he's that. He knows he's Spider-Man. That's always been enough, and also never felt like enough. And the space between those two things is where a lot of the film lives. Tony Stark never told Peter Parker he loved him. That's not a criticism. It's just how Tony expresses things. He shows up with better suits. He takes the suit back when it's necessary. He turns up at ferry disasters with fury and the correct amount of structural support. He builds in training wheels into the suit that he expects Peter to respect, and he later punishes him for overriding them. He leaves him Edo Iteich in the end, which is both the greatest gift and the heaviest possible thing to put down. Peter carries Tony across all 3 films, and after Tony's gone, he carries him differently, carries the absence of him, which is its own weight. The way May's eventual line lands the way it does, the way Peter's final choice in No Way Home lands the way it does, all of it is downstream of Tony Stark showing up in Queens without an appointment and saying, "You're the one." In Captain America, Civil War, Peter Parker webs Steve Rogers' shield out of his hand during the airport battle with his webs, From a standing start on an airport runway against someone who has been throwing that shield for 70 years. Peter catches it, holds it up, can't quite believe he's done it, and says to Steve Rogers, "Hey everyone, sorry Mr. Rogers, I know you're like a really big deal, I'm a huge fan." That line. That one line tells you everything about where Peter is at this point in his story. He's genuinely starstruck. He's apologising to the man he's currently in the process of defeating for the inconvenience. He recognises Captain America as someone important and treats him with respect even mid-combat, because that's just how Peter Parker approaches people. And Steve Rogers, for his part, looks at this kid and says, "Thank you," with a kind of baffled warmth. Peter doesn't win that fight. He does creditably, and then Giant Man shows up and changes the dynamics considerably, and Peter ends up buried under Scott Lang's enormous hold, and clearly very much over it. But the airport sequence is Peter's debut on the big stage, and he is, by any measure, remarkable. Tony watches all of this with the specific expression of someone whose read on a situation has been confirmed. There's also Tony's reaction to Peter's apartment when he first visits. He looks around the space, the small bedroom, the sewing machine, the clearly cobbled together equipment, and something in his face changes. He's a man who grew up with enormous wealth and has spent his adult life engineering at the most elevated possible level, and here is a kid who built functional web shooters in this bedroom with these resources. The understanding of what that represents, not just the intelligence required, but the specific stubbornness, the determination to make something work against the grain of available materials, lands on Tony visibly. That's part of why he gives Peter the suit. He sees himself in what Peter built, at whatever scale. The relationship's afterlife in Far From Home is the thing I find most interesting to trace. Peter's grief for Tony is not performed. It's not a motivation he announces. It's just present in everything. The discomfort with being handed Edith, the reluctance to be the next Iron Man, the way he brightens when someone treats him as his own thing rather than as Tony's successor. He loved Tony. He also doesn't want to be Tony. He wants to be Peter Parker, who was going to be something specific and good on his own terms, and who got that process complicated by falling into the orbit of the most significant person in his world. Happy Hogan, in Far From Home, says something that I think about. Happy Hogan says to Peter, "I don't think Tony would have done what he did if he didn't know you were going to be here after he was gone. Tony trusted you to figure it out." And Peter pushes back. He doesn't know what Tony would have done. He's not Tony. And Happy says, Tony would have been scared right now too. And he would have done it anyway. That's the inheritance, finally named. Not the technology, not the suit, not even the resources, the willingness to be scared and do it anyway. Here is my case for Adrian Toomes as the best villain in the MCU's Spider-Man films, which I acknowledge is a claim that involves competing against Dr. Octopus and the Green Goblin, both of whom we'll get to. But hear me out. The Vulture works because you understand him immediately and completely, and understanding him doesn't make him less threatening. It makes him more threatening in a strange way because there's no comfortable distance between his motivation and your own experience of the world. He's not trying to reshape reality. He's not driven by a childhood wound into nihilism. He's a working man who got squeezed out by a billionaire and decided to stop playing by the rules of a system that didn't protect him. The opening scene of Homecoming is the one that establishes this, and the film is clever about placing it before the title card so it feels slightly separate, slightly different in texture from what follows. Adrian Toomes and his crew are cleaning up after the Battle of New York. The streets of Manhattan are covered in alien debris, destroyed Chitauri equipment, wreckage from the battle, things that have no equivalent in any established human technology framework. Toomes has the salvage contract. His guys are working. They've clearly been at it for days. This is real physical, dirty work that Toomes has organised and that represents his company's livelihood for the foreseeable future. And then a government van shows up. Department of Damage Control, Tony Stark's initiative, backed by the federal government, and they tell Toomes' crew to pack up and leave because the contract has been reassigned. All of it, the entire cleanup operation, gone. Toomes protests. He points out that he has equipment here, materials, workers who have been promised pay, a contract. The government agent shrugs, essentially. This is how it goes. Tony Stark's department handles it now. What Toomes does is practical. He keeps some of the alien material. Not all of it, not openly. He keeps what his team has already loaded, what he can reasonably claim was already in his possession before the reassignment arrived. And then he figures out what to do with it, which turns out to be modified weapons sold on the grey market at considerable profit. The moral line he crosses is real. He doesn't cross it out of greed exactly, or not only out of greed. He crosses it because the official channels have already failed him once in a spectacular and public way, and he has employees to pay and a family to look after, and a business he built that is now operating on borrowed time without this income. The resentment is there, yes. The anger at Tony Stark, at the government, at the system that handed the opportunity to the billionaire rather than the working contractor. It's all there. But underneath the anger is something simpler. He's trying to manage. By the time Homecoming picks up the story, 8 years have passed. Toomes has refined. By the time Homecoming picks up the story, 4 years have passed, and they've become professional about it. They steal the alien and cheatery and Stark tech. They adapt it. They sell it. It's a business. Toomes has a nice house. His daughter Liz is at Midtown Tech. His wife thinks he runs a legitimate salvage operation, probably. The life he has built is real and functional and dependent entirely on not being caught. Adrian Toomes in the normal world is unremarkable. That's one of the film's strongest moves. He's a middle-aged white guy in a nice house, polite at the homecoming dance, the kind of dad who shows up for his daughter's significant moments. If you met him at a school event, you would think, contractor, probably. Decent enough, nothing interesting there. The costume, the mechanical wings, the exosuit, the vulture lives in a warehouse, contained separate from the life he's built. Most of the time, he's just a man. The scene in the car on the way to Homecoming is the one everyone remembers, and for good reason. Toomes has figured out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. It's not stated how exactly, something about the way Peter has been appearing and disappearing throughout the film, some detail that clicked into place. And he doesn't say anything in front of Liz. He waits. And then in the car, on the way to the dance his daughter is going to, he explains to Peter very calmly and very precisely what he will do if Peter gets in his way. It's quiet. It's not a speech. It's a man having a conversation with his daughter's date in a way that his daughter can't quite hear, but that carries every possible implication. And Michael Keaton plays it with a stillness that is genuinely unnerving. There's no performance in it, no villain monologuing, just a man explaining the situation to a kid who is currently in his car and who has nowhere to go for the next 15 minutes. Peter, sitting in the back seat, does not have a good time. What the film does with this scene is more interesting than a standard reveal. Toomes doesn't just threaten Peter, he also, briefly, seems to genuinely understand Peter, recognizes what drives him, recognizes the shape of the person sitting in his car. I respect you, he says, more or less. He means it. This is a man who has made a calculation about how the world works, and who is explaining that calculation to someone he sees as capable of understanding it. Peter, he's saying, knows exactly what Toomes is doing and why. The world is run by people who take what they need. Toomes is just being honest about it. Peter is not persuaded, but he is, for the length of that car ride, unable to do anything about it. The final confrontation at Coney Island is physical and urgent, and the detail that matters most is at the end of it. Toomes' suit malfunctions. There's fire. He's going to die in it. And Peter, who has just been buried under a collapsed building by this man, who has had his suit taken apart by this man, who has been threatened and pursued and fought for the length of the film, Peter drags him clear. He saves the Vulture, his enemy, the man who threatened Liz, to stop Peter from interfering with his operation. Peter saves him because letting him burn is not something Peter is capable of doing. The mechanics of his character don't allow it. And then in the post-credit scene of Homecoming, Toomes is in prison. McGargan approaches him. A fellow criminal who knows Spider-Man's identity, as B. McGargan approaches him. A fellow criminal who has heard a rumour that Toomes knows Spider-Man's identity and asks him to share that information. Man is. Why? The film doesn't explain. I think it's because Peter saved him. I think there's something in Toomes that registered that act and found it worth something. He crossed the line he crossed for good reasons that still resulted in bad things. Peter drew the same line in a different place and held it. Toomes can respect that, even if respecting it means protecting the person who put him in prison. That's not a villain who has reformed. That's a villain who has made a complicated, specific, moral calculation, which is exactly the right ending for this particular character. He's consistent all the way through. He operates by a logic. It just happens to be a logic that accommodates crime. The Vulture is the first significant test of who Peter Parker is outside of the Stark mentorship, and the answer turns out to be someone who saves his enemy from burning and doesn't mention it. That's a good answer. The supporting cast of Toomes' operation is worth a moment, because the film populates his world with enough detail that it feels like a real organisation rather than a convenient gang. The Tinkerer, Gary, credited as such, played with a kind of cheerful professionalism. The Tinkerer, Phineas Mason, credited as such, played with a kind of cheerful professionalism, is the engineer of the operation. Tout of villainy. He's a craftsman. He finds the work interesting. The moral dimension of what the weapons will be used for is something he has apparently made peace with, or chosen not to think about very carefully. The Shocker, there are two of them across the film, is more of an enforcer, more straightforwardly criminal in orientation. The whole operation has the texture of a small business. People with specific roles, a hierarchy, a shared understanding of what they're doing and for whom. What the Tinkerer's work produces is genuinely impressive from a technical standpoint. He's building functional weapons from alien materials that most governments don't have access to. The gauntlet with Chitauri energy cells, the flight suit for Toomes that is genuinely terrifying in how well it functions. The anti-gravity weapon that tears the Staten Island ferry apart, that's applied physics from a completely non-terrestrial source, reverse-engineered by a man working out of a warehouse in Queens. There's a version of this story where the Tinkerer is the most remarkable person in it, technically speaking. The film doesn't draw a line under this because it doesn't need to. It's there if you look. The 8 years between the Battle of New York and the events of Homecoming are mostly unseen in the film, represented only by a title card. 8 years of Toomes running this operation. 8 years of adapting alien weapons. 8 years of building the life in the nice house, the car pickups for the homecoming dance, the veneer of ordinary suburban existence over the warehouse reality. That longevity makes the organisation feel real. These aren't criminals who just started. They've been doing this long enough to be good at it, to have processes and protocols, to understand exactly how to stay below the detection threshold of both normal law enforcement and whatever the Avengers are doing when they're not fighting alien invasions. The specific resentment Toomes carries toward Tony Stark is worth noting as a class argument the film doesn't quite make explicit, but that is definitely there. Tony Stark has the government contract. Tony Stark has the resources. Tony Stark, who is a billionaire, got the clean-up operation that was going to sustain Toomes' working-class contractor business. And he got it through connections and political leverage rather than because his people were already on the ground doing the work. The Avengers create a problem. The solution goes to Stark. The Stark system profits from the Avengers' activity. And the people who were there first, the Adrian Toomeses, The people who work with their hands and their companies get moved along. The film doesn't ask you to celebrate Toomes. His operation has armed genuinely dangerous people with technology capable of significant destruction. Peter's investigation is justified, the arrests are correct, but the film's commitment to showing Toomes as a real person with a real complaint, rather than simply a businessman who chose greed over law, is one of the things that makes Homecoming more interesting than it might otherwise be. Adrian Toomes is not wrong about what happened to him. He is wrong about what he did in response. Both of these things are true simultaneously, and the film holds them both. One last Vulture detail that doesn't get mentioned often. At the very end of the film, as the credits begin, there's a moment with Mac Gargan, a character with his own comics history, hinting at becoming the Scorpion who approaches Toomes in prison and implies he knows people who would be very interested in Spider-Man's identity. Toomes looks at him and says he doesn't know who Spider-Man is. He's lying. He definitely knows. And he's choosing, in this specific moment, to keep the secret. Why? The only explanation that fits the character is, he respected what Peter did. The kid saved him from burning, and then chose not to reveal that to the press or the authorities. There's a ledger operating in Toomes' head, and it balances differently after that. He's in prison, and he might stay there, and he's not going to hand over the identity of the person who decided he was worth saving. That's honour, in its way. It's criminal honour, and it's complicated, and it's the right ending for this character. Far From Home begins with a school video, a memorial montage set to a song called I Will Always Love You, featuring photographs of the heroes who died or were otherwise temporarily lost in the events of Endgame. Tony Stark, Black Widow, Vision, Steve Rogers. The memorial assumes he's gone, which is understandable given the quantum tunnel situation. It's made by the students of Midtown Tech, clearly, with all the aesthetic decisions that implies. It's genuinely funny. It's also, if you let it land, a bit sad. These are kids who grew up in a world that had superheroes in it and then lost several of them. And they're processing this the way teenagers process things, through a creative project with more heart than polish. Peter Parker watches this video from the second row and does not appear to be having a good time. That's where Far From Home starts, not with an adventure, with aftermath. Tony is gone. The world is 5 years on from the snap and still reassembling itself. And Peter, or the world, is 6 years on from the snap and still reassembling itself. Ryan, who was blipped, has moved on in various ways, and the world is still expecting things from him. Just wants to go to Europe for a school trip and try to tell a girl he likes her. This is understandable. This is honestly very human. He's been Spider-Man for a couple of years at this point. He has done things that would break most people. He has earned a school trip to Venice. He has earned the chance to be 16 in a foreign city with his friends and work up the nerve to have a conversation with MJ about his feelings, which should be the most difficult thing happening in his life that particular week. It doesn't work out. The elemental attacks start in Venice, and this is where Quentin Beck enters. He arrives in a swirl of green energy and a costume that manages to look both heroic and slightly theatrical in a way that makes more sense once you know the truth. He introduces himself as Mysterio. He claims to be from an alternate dimension, a parallel Earth where he battled these same elemental creatures and failed, and where the creatures have apparently followed the dimensional passage to this universe. He presents the story with a lot of detail and internal consistency because he's very good at this. He's been practicing. Beck is, underneath the mystical energy effects, a former Stark Industries engineer. He created a technology called BARF, Binarily Augmented Retroframing, which is an augmented reality system that can project lifelike illusions of sufficient fidelity to completely deceive human senses. Tony Stark gave it an embarrassing acronym at a company presentation and apparently found it quite funny. Beck did not find it quite funny. Beck found it humiliating, actually, in the specific way that public mockery from someone enormously more powerful and celebrated the new can be humiliating, especially when the thing being mocked is genuinely significant work that you're proud of. He was fired. Or left. The details are somewhat unclear because we're getting them through the Persbeck was fired from Stark Industries of people who disliked him, which is its own unreliable narrator situation. But he left Stark Industries with his technology, his resentment, and eventually a plan that is quite elaborate, even by the standards of MCU villain plans. The elemental creatures are not real. There are no elemental creatures. They are sophisticated holographic illusions generated by a fleet of drones running Beck's projection system, coordinated by a team of people who are also former Stark Industries employees with their own varying grudges. The entire scenario has been staged to create the impression that Earth needs a new defender now that Iron Man is gone, and that the new defender is Mysterio. What Beck understood, and this is the thematically interesting part, is that Peter Parker would be recruited into the story, because Peter is the next closest thing to Tony's legacy, and Peter would, at some point, be given access to Tony's remaining infrastructure. So Beck positioned himself as the trustworthy, experienced adult, the one who already knows about the threat, the one who Peter should logically hand Edith to. He built a trap that was designed to spring when Peter decided to trust someone. And Peter does trust him. Of course he does. Peter is grieving Tony, and he's been handed an enormous amount of responsibility that he didn't ask for, and that he's not sure he's ready for. And here is someone older and more experienced who seems to genuinely know what to do. The decision to hand over Edith is not a failure of intelligence. It's a failure of experience. There's a difference. Peter isn't stupid. He's just young, and young in a way that grief has made younger, because grief tends to make you need people more rather than less. The illusion trap in the Netherlands is the sequence that stuck with me most on first watch. It's not a fight. It's not even quite a chase. Beck constructs a series of false realities designed specifically to disorient and destabilize Peter, not physically, not initially, but psychologically. The illusions are built around Peter's specific fears and insecurities. They show him versions of Tony, versions of the suits, versions of things that matter to him, in wrong configurations that can't be fully processed. It's designed to make him unable to trust his own perception, and it nearly works completely. Peter gets hit by a train while he can't tell what's real. He wakes up in a police station in the Netherlands, in his pyjamas with no suit and no phone, and no idea what happened. There's something about that specific scenario, a superpowered teenager in his pyjamas in a Dutch police station, completely alone, having just been defeated not by superior power, but by someone who understood his psychology. That is quietly one of the more honest depictions of what this kind of life actually costs. It's not glamorous. It's not an action sequence. It's just a very tired kid who got very badly hurt and is now figuring out what comes next with nothing. What comes next is he builds a new suit in a hangar using available materials, and he goes back to London and he uses his actual intelligence, not Stark technology, not the AI, his own understanding of how Beck's system works, to dismantle the illusion in the middle of the final confrontation. He worked out the mechanics of the deception. He reversed the map. Beck dies from his own drone's fire. His last act is a deepfake video framing Peter for the elemental attacks and revealing his identity to the world. Both of those things are very Mysterio. He cannot stop performing, even dying. The name Mysterio has a lot of history in the comics, and there are versions of Quentin Beck in other media that are quite different from this one. But the EMCU version is, I think, the most thematically rich because what he represents is the dark version of what Tony Stark was to Peter. Beck is also a brilliant inventor who built things Tony Stark eclipsed. He's also a man in a suit performing a version of himself. He's also someone who, at bottom, wanted to be seen as important. The difference is what he did with that need. Tony turned his into Iron Man. Beck turned his into Mysterio. One is real, one is entirely constructed. And Peter, grieving the real thing, very nearly mistook the construction for the genuine article. That's the wound the film leaves, not the train, not the identity reveal. The fact that in the space where Tony used to be, someone built a very convincing imitation. And for a while, it was enough. The team Beck assembles is one of the more interesting background details in Far From Home. He hasn't done this alone. There's an entire group of former Stark Industries, employees, engineers, programmers, technicians, who have pooled their grievances and their capabilities to produce the elemental attack system. They wear motion capture suits to animate the holographic creatures. They coordinate the drone fleet from concealed positions. They have specific jobs, and they do those jobs with professional competence. Several of them have genuine objections to Tony Stark, genuine reasons to feel overlooked or dismissed or used. And Beck has found them and channeled those objections into this project. It's a fascinating infrastructure for villainy. Not a superpower, not alien technology or mystical artifacts. Just a group of talented people with a shared grudge and a shared skill set, led by someone with the charisma to organize them and the vision to provide direction. Beck is not more powerful than any of them individually. He's the one who had the idea. He's the one who understood what story to tell and how to tell it. Mysterio is, at root, a production company, a small film studio making spectacle, hoping that the audience, specifically Peter Parker, but also the world, will believe the fiction. There's something almost admirable about the ambition of the plan, in the deeply uncomfortable way that well-executed bad things can be almost admirable. Beck identified a real gap. The world needs a new hero post-Endgame. The Avengers are scattered and diminished. There's an emotional vacuum where Iron Man used to be, and decided to fill that gap artificially. The elemental creatures are not real, but the fear they generate is real. The gratitude people feel toward Mysterio is real. The SHIELD-level credibility Beck achieves through Fury's apparent endorsement is real, even though Fury in this film is eventually revealed to not actually be Fury. He's a Skrull called Talos in disguise, which is its own rabbit hole. The structures of trust Beck exploits are real, even when the thing he's presenting is entirely constructed. Peter's specific vulnerability to Beck's plan is not stupidity, as mentioned earlier, but it's worth being specific about what it is. It's grief dressed as hope. Peter needs there to be a reliable adult in his landscape who understands these situations and can be trusted to manage them. Tony was that person. Tony is gone. Beck presents himself perfectly calibrated to fill that space. He's older, experienced, capable, unambiguous about who the threats are and what to do about them. He treats Peter with respect. He doesn't talk down to him. He acknowledges his capability. He's everything Peter is searching for in that particular moment. And then he isn't. And the thing that is left when the fiction collapses is Peter alone in the Netherlands, in his pajamas, working out from first principles who he can trust when the available adults have turned out to be liars or disguised extraterrestrials. The answer, eventually, is himself. It's always been himself. The films have been building toward that answer from the beginning. Far From Home is where it gets tested most directly. The London battle has a quality that I find genuinely interesting in retrospect, which is that Peter wins it by thinking rather than fighting. He's not more powerful than the drone fleet. He can't outmuscle 1,000 armed drones. What he can do is close his eyes, which is the move that unlocks everything. Close his eyes and trust his senses, and stop trying to process the visual information that Beck's system is designed to corrupt. His spider sense, his enhanced proprioception, his ability to track and respond to actual physical objects rather than projected images. None of that can be fooled by a hologram. The illusions are precisely and only visual deceptions. Turn off your vision and they don't exist. That's the solution. A kid from Queens closed his eyes and trusted himself and dismantled the most sophisticated deception operation in EMCU history. No additional technology required. There's a version of the Spider-Man story that treats everyone who isn't Spider-Man as decoration. The love interest, the best friend, the worried aunt, stock roles populated by stock characters whose primary function is to create consequences for the hero and to be endangered at convenient narrative moments. The EMCU version of this trilogy doesn't do that, and the not doing it is one of the things that makes it work, as well as it does. Peter Parker's people are specific, and their specificity is what makes the cost of losing them legible when it eventually arrives. Let's start with Ned. Ned Leeds is Peter's best friend, and, I would argue, the most straightforwardly joyful character in the EMCU's Spider-Man films. His defining trait is enthusiasm that hasn't been socialized out of him. He is genuinely, unreservedly excited about things, including Peter being Spider-Man, including the prospect of being the guy in the chair, including everything. He builds a full-scale Lego Millennium Falcon in Peter's bedroom. He does this with Awnid builds a full-scale Lego Death Star in Peter's bedroom to performing cool. He doesn't seem aware that performing cool is an option. The moment he finds out Peter is Spider-Man is worth pausing on. He's in Peter's room. The Falcon is nearly complete. He's reaching for a piece, and he knocks the Falcon off the shelf, and Peter instinctively goes up the wall to catch it. Ned turns around and Peter is on the ceiling. Ned processes this. He asks, "Are you an Avenger?" Not, "What is happening?" or "How is this possible?" or "I'm scared." Are you an Avenger? He is immediately on board. And that onboardness is not just played for comedy, though it is also played for comedy. Ned actually helps. He covers for Peter at school in ways that require genuine presence of mind. He hacks the Stark suit to access the full systems, specifically the disabling of the training wheels protocol, using skills that are not trivial. He runs comms from the school library, while Peter is trying to stop tombs. He is functionally extremely useful. The film never condescends to him for this. He's not bumbling comic relief who accidentally helps. He's a competent person applying his skills to an unusual situation. There's a detail in No Way Home that I find quietly delightful. Ned accidentally obtains Doctor Strange's sling ring, a device that allows its user to open portals between locations, which requires genuine sorcerous ability to use. Ned, who has no established magical ability, just uses it. He opens portals. He doesn't understand why he can do it. Strange later looks at him with an expression that suggests he's going to want to look into this at some point. The implication is that Ned might have actual magical aptitude that nobody knew about. It's played lightly, not developed further, but it's one of those details that makes the world feel slightly larger than the plot requires it to be. When Peter visits Ned in No Way Home, after everyone has forgotten Peter Parker exists, Ned doesn't remember him. He has a new friend group. He's doing fine. He doesn't know what he's lost. But he is, even without the memory of Peter, recognisably himself. He's kind, he's warm. He's the same person he would have been if they were still friends. The film understands that good people stay good even when the specific friendship that shaped them has been removed. Ned is not defined by knowing Peter Parker. He's defined by being Ned Leeds. Peter's friendship just got to live alongside that for a while. Now, MJ Michelle Jones is introduced in Homecoming as a footnote. She's in the background of several scenes, reading, making dry remarks nobody asked for, showing up where she wants to be, with complete indifference to whether she was expected. She volunteers for academic decathlon, and then, when the team is going to Washington, D.C., tells them she's not coming because she doesn't want to contribute to the celebration of imperialism. She comes anyway. She shows up on the Washington Monument, looking at the others from a distance, and when the crisis happens, Peter having to rescue Ned from inside the monument, she stands outside being worried in a way she won't name. "I don't have any friends," she says, flat, to a teacher who mentions the others are all Peter's friends. And you can read this two ways, and both ways are true simultaneously. 1. She is reporting a fact about her social situation. 2. She is performing indifference to a thing she actually wants. MJ does this a lot. She builds distance because distance is protective, and she's smart enough to understand that people who get close to you can hurt you. She also slowly, across 3 films, allows that distance to close for Peter specifically. Not with a big speech, not with a scene of declared vulnerability, just by being present a bit more, and then a bit more, until the distance is something different. She figures out Peter is Spider-Man on her own. She doesn't make a thing of it. She mentions it in Homecoming, almost as a casual observation. I don't know, she mentions it in Far From Home, almost as a casual observation. Heinzier's denial so unconvincing, it barely qualifies as an attempt. MJ is 3 steps ahead of most situations, at all times. This is consistently true. The relationship in Far From Home is properly lovely actually. Peter trying to find the right moment to tell MJ how he feels is played with the specific awkwardness of someone who is very good at other things and quite bad at this one particular thing. And MJ's responses are, she's not making it easy for him, but she's not making it hard either. She's watching. She's already figured it out. She's waiting for him to catch up. The conversation they finally have on a rooftop in Prague is earnest and sweet The conversation they finally have on the Charles Bridge in Prague is earnest and sweet in a way the films don't always give themselves permission to be. Have built a life around Peter and what they were becoming. She forgets him. Completely. She's working in a coffee shop. She doesn't know his name. She looks at him the way you look at a stranger. Peter stands at the door of the coffee shop and doesn't go in. He sees her, he thinks about it, and he makes the choice not to reintroduce himself. Not because he doesn't love her, he clearly does, and the film doesn't pretend otherwise, but because bringing her back into his life means putting her in danger again. The villains will keep coming. They always keep coming. MJ being a stranger to him is the only version of safety he can offer her. This is a 17-year-old, maybe 18, standing in the street in winter, looking at the person he loves through a coffee shop window and choosing not to walk in. That's the actual cost of the thesis statement the films have been building toward. It's not a snap that erases half of all life. It's a girl in a coffee shop who doesn't know his name. Aunt May deserves her own sustained moment here, because the EMCU version of May Parker is genuinely different from most other versions of the character, and the difference matters. In most tellings of the Spider-Man story, May Parker is elderly, fragile, a source of worry rather than support. Someone Peter protects by keeping her in the dark. The MCU. May is in her mid-40s, alive in a different way, warm rather than warm and worried. She finds out Peter is Spider-Man between films, and her reaction is never shown, only referenced in the tone of someone who is processing something big but choosing to meet it with love rather than fear. By No Way Home, she is actively involved. She's running a shelter for displaced blip returnees. She and Happy Hogan are dating, or were, which is genuinely funny, and also characterized with a casualness that makes it feel real. She believes in the plan to cure the visiting villains more completely than anyone. She advocates for it. She's the one who brings Norman Osborn to the shelter. She's the one who says, these are people, they deserve the chance to be better than what they became. And then the Goblin shows up, and the Goblin doesn't distinguish between people who deserve mercy and people who are in the way. May dies in Peter's arms. Her last words are the line that has existed in the Spider-Man mythology for decades. With great power comes great responsibility, and the reason the MCU saves it until this moment is precise. The line has been implicit throughout the trilogy. Tony gestured at versions of it. It's been the operating principle of everything Peter does. But saying it would have been lesser, earlier, smaller, instructional. Said by May here, dying, it isn't instructional. It's valediction. She's not telling him something new. She's confirming what he already is. That's the right place for the line. Earned is an underused word, but this is what it means. And then Happy Hogan, briefly, because Happy deserves at least a paragraph, even in a list. Happy is the reluctant bridge between Tony and Peter throughout the trilogy, dispatched as liaison, and clearly regarding this as a mixed blessing at best. He doesn't respond to Peter's texts. He is repeatedly, consistently exasperated. He is also, underneath all of this, genuinely fond of the kid. His relationship with May, which is unexpected and sweet and mutual in a way that suggests two people who found a specific chemistry they weren't looking for, humanizes him considerably. And his grief at Tony's death is real and unperformed, and one of the more quietly moving things in Endgame's first act. He keeps showing up for Peter. He doesn't do it with warmth and speeches, he does it by being there and being practical, and occasionally being furious about having to be there. That's its own kind of love. These people are not Tony Stark. They don't have his resources or his genius or his specific combination of arrogance and care, but they are present. And for Peter Parker, who keeps losing the people he leans on, presence turns out to be the thing that matters. There's a progression in how Peter relates to the people around him across the 3 films that's worth tracing, because it follows the same arc as his relationship with the suits. Early on, he keeps everyone at arm's length, not out of indifference, but out of the specific anxiety of someone who knows what they are and what it attracts. The villains find the people around you. That's just how it works. If nobody knows you're Spider-Man, the people you love are safe. If everyone knows, they're targets. Ned knows in Homecoming, and Peter is terrified, briefly, and then it turns out that Ned knowing is mostly fine. Better than fine, actually. Ned's help is genuine, and the friendship deepens rather than becoming complicated. MJ figures it out and doesn't tell anyone, and that becomes its own kind of trust. May finds out and meets it with love. Each revelation that Peter feared turns out to be okay. The people who matter can handle it, and then No Way Home makes the case that Peter was right to be afraid all along. May dies because the Goblin tracked them to the shelter. The shelter where May was operating was known because Peter brought Norman Osborn there. The chain of causation runs directly from the people around Peter know he's Spider-Man to May is dead. His original anxiety was correct. He just had to live through it to understand exactly how correct. This is one of the crueler structural choices in the trilogy. It gives Peter several films of evidence that his fear was wrong, that love can be kept and protected, that there's a version of his life where he gets to be Spider-Man and have the people he cares about in it, and then it proves him right in the worst possible way. The ending of No Way Home isn't Peter choosing to be selfless. It's Peter choosing the only option that makes the previous lesson bearable. If everyone forgets him, the chain doesn't connect. The people he loves are safe because they don't know the person whose dangers they'd be inheriting. Since we're on the subject of people around Peter and what they mean to him, Happy Hogan's position in the later films has changed in ways that don't always get registered. He is, by Far From Home, something more than just Tony's liaison. He's a genuine presence in May's life, and therefore in Peter's, and his relationship with Peter in that film has changed because Tony is gone, and Happy is one of the remaining people who knew Tony, who worked for Tony, who carries that specific loss. There are 2 of them in that conversation, in the hangar in the Netherlands. 2P in Spider-Man. Far From Home, there is a conversation on a jet after Peter is stranded in the Netherlands between Happy Hogan and Peter Parker.ck. That's all he does. It's enough. The character of Flash Thompson also deserves a brief note here, because he's handled in the EMCU version differently from many other adaptations, and the difference matters for what it says about Peter's world. Flash is not a bruiser who physically bullies Peter. He's a social tormentor, the kind of person who calls Peter Penis Parker and posts about it online and treats the mockery as a performance, something to do rather than something motivated by genuine malice. He's mean in the specific way of someone who doesn't register the effect of their words on other people. And then Spider-Man shows up in his life, and Flash becomes Spider-Man's biggest fan, which is an irony the film enjoys without over-explaining. Flash being a Spider-Man fan while being unkind to the person who is Spider-Man is a small good observation about how we relate to personas versus people. Flash doesn't like Peter Parker. He'd be stunned, possibly undone, to find out they're the same. The MCU uses this lightly, for comedy, but there's something true in it about the way we can admire the idea of a person at a distance while being indifferent or cruel to the actual human in front of us. No Way Home starts where Far From Home ended. Peter Parker's face on every screen in New York, his name attached to a murder charge, his address public knowledge, his school life destroyed. The mid-credits reveal of his identity isn't just a cliffhanger, it's a structural collapse. The entire life he's maintained alongside being Spider-Man, the school, the friends, the small apartment with May, has been exposed to a world that now has opinions about all of it. The immediate consequences are precisely observed. Peter, Ned, and MJ spend a night on a rooftop, while lawyers and police work through the situation. Matt Murdock appears, a blind lawyer from Hell's Kitchen, who also happens to be a vigilante, though that's not mentioned here, and manages to get the criminal charges reduced or dropped through what appear to be quite impressive legal maneuvers. He catches a brick that someone throws through Peter's window without looking up from his paperwork. Nobody comments on this. The film trusts the audience, but cleared of charges is not fixed. Peter's face is everywhere. His school enrollment is being contested because nobody wants the liability of the famous murderer or hero, depending on which media outlet you're reading. MIT, where Peter, MJ, and Ned had applied, rejects them on the grounds of association with ongoing controversy. The colleges don't want the attention, which is, on reflection, completely believable. Institutions are very risk-averse. Of course, MIT pulls the application. This is the decision that sends Peter to Doctor Strange. Not the murder charge, not the media coverage, those he could try to weather. But the idea that his choice to be Spider-Man has cost Ned and MJ their futures is the thing he can't absorb. He didn't protect them. He dragged them into a consequence they didn't choose. Strange agrees to cast the spell, a spell to make the whole world forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. It's a large spell. It requires concentration, and Peter keeps interrupting it. He wants MJ to remember, and then Ned, and then May, and then Happy, and then his teachers, because there are MIT faculty who know him, and he doesn't want to lose the connection. Every exception he tries to add fractures the spell further. Strange is holding something together with enormous effort that keeps getting threads pulled out of it by a teenager who cannot commit to being forgotten by the people he loves. The spell doesn't fail because Peter is weak or reckless. It fails because he cannot completely let go of the people who matter to him. That's a fundamental character trait, and it has consequences. The fracture pulls in people from other universes, specifically anyone in any universe who knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. This turns out to be a large number of people, and the first ones to arrive are the villains: Dr. Otto Octavius, Norman Osborn, Max Dillon, Flint Marko, Curtis Connors. 5 of them, from at least 2 different parallel universes, suddenly in the MCU's New York. Strange's position is clear: send them back. They don't belong here. The multiverse is already fractured. Every moment these people remain makes the situation worse. Peter's position is also clear, and it comes from the same moral architecture that has been driving him since before we met him. These people don't deserve to die. Most of them died, or will die, in their original universes, killed by their conditions, killed in the fight with Spider-Man. Sending them back without curing them first isn't neutral, it's choosing their deaths. He steals the magic box Strange is using to manage the ruptures. This is not a tactically brilliant move. Strange catches him fairly quickly, and it turns into a chase through the mirror dimension, the folding city visual, that Strange's films love, and then into a situation where Peter essentially uses geometry to outthink a sorcerer, which is a specific kind of satisfaction. He traps Strange in a rotating prism using the architecture of the dimension Strange is trying to use against him. Peter's spatial reasoning and physics knowledge applied in real time under pressure. The suit helped, the brain did the work. The work sessions in Happy's apartment are one of the film's stranger and more charming passages. 5 interdimensional supervillains in various states of transformation, a teenager with chemistry homework level equipment, and the implicit task of reversing conditions that took years and catastrophic accidents to produce. Peter works through the night. He builds what he can. Connors, the lizard, gets a serum. Dylan, Electro, gets a stabilizer. Octavius gets the inhibitor chip repaired. The conversation with Otto Octavius is woe Octavius gets the inhibitor chip replaced, repaired, and the arm's influence over his mind is interrupted. Octavius returns to himself. The brilliant, slightly eccentric scientist, not the villain the arms made him. He looks at the arms differently when he's himself. They're tools he built. They have been tools he was used by. The distinction matters to him enormously. You can see it. He and Peter talk about the mechanics of the inhibitor chip, the way 2 scientists would, with genuine interest and mutual respect. It's a genuinely sweet scene tucked into the middle of a film that is mostly grief. Sandman, Flint Marco, is more complicated. His condition isn't entirely a condition imposed from outside. He became sand, partly, because of a choice he made, and the long period since has made him something different, something that isn't entirely the original person anymore. He leaves before the cure is complete. It's presented as ambivalence more than reject. He leaves after the cure is complete. He didn't finish the process, and the film doesn't entirely explain why. I think it's because he's not sure anymore which parts of himself he's supposed to want back. Norman Osborn is the problem that can't be solved by chemistry. Norman arrives in this universe in a moment of genuine lucidity. He's confused, he's frightened. He doesn't know where he is. He submits to being cured because the part of him that is Norman rather than the Goblin wants to be fixed. But the Goblin is not a separate entity in the way Octavius's arms are a separate entity. The Goblin is what Norman Osborn becomes when there are no restraints left on the parts of himself he doesn't show the world. You can't chemistry away a person's shadow. You can suppress the physical trigger of the transformation, but the person who made those choices, who pursued that power, who became capable of that violence, that person is still in there. The Goblin breaks through, destroys the cures, destroys the apartment, and then the confrontation at the shelter. And May. There is a version of No Way Home's emotional arc, where May's death is just the inciting tragedy that launches the 3rd act. But it's more than that. May is the last person who knew Peter in his full context. Not just as Spider-Man, not just as a brilliant teenager, but as the specific kid she raised. When she dies, the last adult anchor in Peter's personal life is gone. Tony is gone. Ben was gone before the film started. Now May, the people who knew who he was before he became anything, are all gone. The now May. In the EMCU continuity, May is now dead. TR carries through the final act of No Way Home is not the clean, purposeful grief of a hero who's going to channel loss into strength. It's messy and furious. He wants to kill the Goblin. He almost does kill him. And if Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker hadn't been there to physically stop him, rapid Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker stops Tom Holland's Peter from killing the Goblin. Room. Ned, trying to summon this universe's Peter with Strange's sling ring, accidentally opens a portal to the wrong universe. Then another wrong universe. The 3 Spider-Men meet in a moment. That is, look, it's genuinely charming. I don't have another word for it. 3 versions of the same person, from 3 different eras of filmmaking, standing in the same space, immediately understanding each other completely, because they are, in all the ways that matter, the same person. They compare notes on their webs. Tobey Maguire's Peter has organic web production. It comes from his wrists. It's biological. It requires no cartridges. The other two are using mechanical web shooters they built themselves. There is something medically interesting about the organic web situation that the other Peters are immediately curious about. It's absurd and endearing, but the conversation that the film builds to, the one that happens when they're working on the cures together and the subject turns to the losses they've each accumulated, that conversation is the film's emotional core. Peter 3, Tobey Maguire's Peter, has been at this for a long time. He's made something like peace with the cost of it. He's still Spider-Man, but he's doing it differently now, quieter, steadier, less certain of anything than he used to be. He's the version of Peter who's arrived somewhere on the other side of the worst parts and survived it. Peter 2, Andrew Garfield's Peter, is in the middle of it. He lost Gwen Stacy, fell from a clock tower during a fight, and he was there, and his web was almost fast enough. Almost. He's been carrying almost for years. He's become more withdrawn, less trusting, less willing to let anyone get close because the math on getting close keeps coming out badly. He knows this isn't healthy. He doesn't know how to change it. And this Peter, Tom Holland's Peter 1, the one the films have been following, is at the beginning of it, raw and new, and still deciding what the cost actually means. 3 versions of the same grief at different points of the same arc, and they sit with each other for a while. Nobody fixes anybody. Nobody has answers. They just recognize each other. The battle at the Statue of Liberty is big and complicated, and there's scaffolding involved, and at some point, the Captain America shield monument is nearly knocked off the top of the building. It resolves. The Goblin is cured. Peter chooses not to kill him, chooses the cure over the revenge, which is the right choice, and the harder one. The cures are administered. The villains are sent home. But the ruptures in the multiverse are getting worse. Every second these people stay, more people who know Peter Parker pull toward this universe. It will not stop on its own. The only thing that will stop it is the complete erasure of Peter Parker from everyone's memory. Not Spider-Man, Peter Parker, the person. Everyone who knows Peter Parker, Strange says, and the word everyone carries everything. Peter makes the choice. He tells MJ and Ned he's going to do this, knowing they won't remember. He said it. He embraces them both. He knows this is goodbye. They don't yet know what goodbye means in this context. Strange casts the spell. The magic moves across the world, and Peter Parker stops existing in the memory of everyone who ever knew him. The mechanics of the spell are worth thinking about for a moment, because the film is specific about them in a way that has implications. Strange's spell doesn't target Peter's secret identity, it targets everyone who knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. That's not quite the same thing. It means the spell is pulling in anyone, anywhere, in any universe for whom that knowledge exists. The fracture doesn't just pull in enemies, it could theoretically pull in anyone. Friends, family, civilians who figured it out, journalists who investigated, government officials, people who caught glimpses. The 5 villains are the most dramatically significant arrivals, but the implication is that the rupture was attracting a much larger population of people before Strange managed to stabilize it at all. There's something interesting in this about the nature of identity and knowledge. Who you are in this reading is partly defined by who knows what about you. Peter Parker's identity as Spider-Man exists not just in his own mind, but in the minds of everyone who carries that knowledge. The spell is effectively rewriting the external record of who he is, not his own memory, not his own self, but the distributed network of consciousness that holds the information about him. When that rewriting is complete, Peter Parker, the person, still exists. But Peter Parker, as known by others, is gone. The Strange Peter fight through the mirror dimension is one of the film's more underrated sequences. Strange has enormous power and enormous experience. Peter has enhanced reflexes, a physics background, and the specific advantage of being in an environment that operates on spatial logic that he can actually use. He doesn't beat Strange through force, he beats him through geometry, creates a rotational system that Strange can't easily escape, using the mirror dimension's own rules against its most experienced practitioner. It's not a fair fight, and Peter winning it isn't a statement about relative power. It's a statement about Peter's specific intelligence, applied in the right environment at the right moment. That's a pattern. The work session at Happy's apartment is about 8 hours of elapsed time that the film compresses considerably. And the compression is justified, but slightly unfortunate because the texture of that time is interesting. Peter and the two visiting Peters from other universes, working together at a technical level for the first time, discovering the specific ways their respective knowledge bases overlap and differ. The Octavius conversation is the longest individual interaction, but there are implications about the others too. The lizard cure requiring specific biological knowledge that this Peter's chemistry background might not cover without help. The electrostabilizer requiring electrical engineering at a fairly sophisticated level. They pool what they know, it works, and the goblin is waiting in the background of all of this. Norman Osborn genuinely trying to be the recovered version, sitting at a table in a shelter that May Parker is running, managing his own fear of what he is. You can see in those scenes why May believes in the project. He looks like someone trying. He looks like someone who wants to be different. And then the internal chemistry shifts, the restraint breaks, and the trying isn't enough. The post-death scenes after the grief settles into something that has to be carried rather than processed, are carried by Tom Holland without speeches. He just moves differently, slower, more deliberate. He goes to the Statue of Liberty because that's where the confrontation has to happen, not because he's ready for it. He's not ready. He goes anyway. The detail of Tobey Maguire's Peter absorbing a knife to stop this Peter from killing the goblin is the most unexpected physical moment in the film. He just steps in, takes the stab. Not dramatically, not as a sacrifice speech, just as a practical intervention. This is about to go wrong. I'm here, I'll stop it. He holds this Peter Parker who's about to do something irreversible, and he holds him physically and says, I know what you're feeling. Don't. And this Peter stops, chooses differently. Cure's Uncle Ben in The Amazing Spider-Man says, I think I know what you're feeling. That choice is the whole trilogy, distilled. The principle May just died confirming. The responsibility that comes with the power he has. He has the power to kill the goblin and the responsibility to not use it. Not because it would be tactically wrong, but because it would cost him something he can't recover. He knows this. He chooses accordingly. Now here's the thing about the 3 Spider-Men scene. It relies entirely on borrowed emotional weight. The 2 additional Peter Parkers who come through Ned's accidental portals are from different studios' film franchises. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy from the early 2000s, Mark Webb's The Amazing Spider-Man films from the early 2010s. These are films that exist outside the EMCU continuity. They're not officially connected. They were made by different people, with different tones and different priorities, and in many cases different casting decisions. And yet, put the 3 actors in a room and give them one conversation about grief, and it works completely. Not despite the distance between the versions, but because of it. Because each version of Spider-Man accumulated their losses across their own films. And those losses are specific and real, and the audience who watch those films carries those losses into the No Way Home cinema. You don't need a recap. The grief is already there. All the film has to do is acknowledge it. But talking a bit about each version, because the lore of who they are is worth having. Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker came first. 2002, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, a film that has aged in some ways into exactly the kind of comic book movie that it always was, slightly heightened, slightly melodramatic, with a colour palette that reads as a primary school painting of a superhero. which is not a criticism. It's operating on a frequency that knows exactly what it is and commits to it completely. The spider bite, the wrestling match, the burglar, Uncle Ben. The origin as it was intended, with all the beats in their proper order. Tobey Maguire's Peter is gentler than later versions, quieter, more obviously kind, with a relationship to heroism that feels chosen rather than imposed. His 3-film arc involves the Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, and the Venom symbiote, and each one tests something different. The Green Goblin, Norman Osborn, Willem Dafoe, is his first great villain, and it's the Norman who appears in No Way Home, older and darker and the same. The Dr. Octopus arc in Spider-Man 2 is, I think, the best individual Spider-Man villain story in any of the films, a tragic arc about a good man whose ambitions lead him to catastrophe, and who is saved at the end by choosing sacrifice over survival. The third film is the complicated one, and we'll leave it there. His Peter, by the time of No Way Home, has been doing this for years. There are grey hairs implied. There's a stillness to him that suggests someone who has absorbed a lot, and is carrying it without drama. He tells the others, when asked if he's okay, that he's working through it. Just that. Working through it. Not fixed, not broken, working through it. That seems true. He also, in the film's best physical gag, catches a knife in his bare hand during the fight. Just catches it out of the air with his palm, and then looks at it with an expression suggesting he's slightly surprised himself. No one comments, it's perfect. Andrew Garfield's Peter, the Amazing Spider-Man versions 2012 and 2014, is a different energy entirely. More technically interested in the physics of web slinging, more visibly lonely, wearing the suit in a way that looks more like something he built for himself than something that was given to him. Mark Webb's films have a specific aesthetic, slightly washed out, urban, with a naturalistic quality to Peter's home environment that the Raimi films don't reach for. His great love is Gwen Stacy, played by Emma Stone, and Gwen is still one of the best romantic counterparts in superhero cinema because she's as intelligent as Peter, more competent in several specific areas, and the dynamic between them is genuinely equal rather than the hero and the person being protected structure that these stories can default to. She knows he's Spider-Man. She makes her own choices about what to do with that knowledge. She is not passive in her own story. She dies in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 during a battle. She falls from the clock tower of Oscorp. Andrew Garfield's Peter is there. He shoots a web to catch her. His web gets there. She's caught. But the force of the stop, the physics of it, the sudden arrested momentum, may have been too much. She dies anyway, possibly from the impact of the catch itself. The film is not entirely clear. It may not matter. What matters is that she fell, and he was there, and she's gone. Andrew Garfield's Peter in No Way Home is someone who has been carrying this for years and is very aware that he is carrying it and has become somewhat philosophical about the carrying without being okay about it. He's functioning. He's still Spider-Man. He went quieter after Gwen. And he knows he went quieter, which is its own kind of grief, knowing what you used to be like. The moment where he catches MJ, this universe's MJ, Tom Holland's MJ, not Gwen, not his person, is the scene. She falls from the scaffolding during the battle, and he catches her and he holds her and makes sure she's okay, and then he holds on for a moment. He looks at her, and you can see what he's thinking, which is, I caught her, I caught this one. It doesn't undo anything. It doesn't restore what was lost, but there is a version of himself that couldn't catch anyone, and he just wasn't that version. That's all it is, one catch. Unremarkable in a film full of spectacular things, and it's the most emotionally overwhelming moment in the whole film. The conversation between the three Peters about what they've each lost is not scored for maximum emotional impact. It doesn't need to be. It's three people sitting on the roof of Happy's apartment building in the middle of In No Way Home. 3 Spidermen sit on the roof of Midtown's School of Science and Technology. Our conclusion of the conversation is that they help each other better than they've been helped. They give each other information. They give each other the specific comfort of not needing to explain. "I don't know how you guys have been doing this alone," says one of them. And the other 2 don't answer immediately, because the answer is badly, actually, in various ways. The film understands that Spider-Man is a character who tends to isolate himself when things get difficult. It's a recurring pattern across all 3 iterations. The powers make him feel responsible. The responsibility makes him feel like the costs should only be his. The isolation becomes its own kind of damage. What No Way Home gives him, briefly, before the ending, is the experience of not being alone in it, not being mentored, not being protected, just being alongside 2 people who have been through the same thing and made it. It doesn't last. The ending requires everyone to forget everyone. But for that one night on a rooftop in New York, there were 3 of them, and they were the same person, and it was enough. One small detail worth mentioning. The 3 Peters collaborating on the cures is played as a montage, but the specific framing is that each Peter contributes what he knows. This Peter knows the stark tech applications. That Peter knows the physics of the arms. The other Peter knows the biology. Combined, they're more than any of them individually, which is, quietly, the film's argument about what it would mean if Spider-Man didn't have to do everything alone. They just don't get to keep it. The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 2 specifically deserves a moment here, because it's the film that most directly addresses the question of what happens when Spider-Man tries to stop. In that film, Peter loses his powers. The precise reason is never entirely clear. Psychosomatic, the films imply, connected to internal conflict about whether he wants to keep doing this. He can't make his webs work. He can't stick to walls properly. He's just a person. And being just a person is, for a moment, appealing. He gets to have the life, Mary Jane, the apartment, the work, the normality. He gets to see what it would look like. And then a fusion reactor goes critical, and Otto Octavius is going to destroy half of New York. And Peter finds himself on the side of a building, willing himself to stick. And he does. The powers come back because the alternative is unacceptable. He chooses it. The powers come back because he chooses to have them, psychosomatically. And then he goes to stop the fusion reactor. That arc, the loss of powers and their return as a choice, maps onto what Tom Holland's Peter goes through across the trilogy in a different register. He never literally loses the powers, but there's a version of No Way Home where he chooses the life that doesn't cost everything. He reintroduces himself to MJ, Strange recasts a narrower spell. He goes to MIT and studies physics and becomes whatever he would have become without all of this. He could have that. The film gives him the option clearly enough that the choice not to take it is visible as a choice. He doesn't take it. He goes out in the homemade suit instead. The powers are always a choice in this reading, not just an inheritance. Peter Parker chooses, continuously, to be Spider-Man. The bite gave him the option. The character is in what he does with it. Andrew Garfield's Peter, in his specific 2-film arc, is doing something slightly different. The Amazing Spider-Man films are interested in the question of inherited obligation. Peter's parents were scientists who worked on cross-species genetics, and the spider that bit him was developed using research connected to that work. And there are implications about his specific biology that make him more than just a randomly selected victim of a radioactive accident. He was, possibly, always going to be something like this. The films never fully commit to this thread, which is one of their frustrations, but the texture of it is there. What his films do commit to is the Gwen relationship, and they do that well. Gwen is a scientist, genuinely interested in the same things Peter is interested in, capable of following the technical aspects of his work without it being condescending. She's going to Oxford. She has a future that doesn't involve any of this. She chooses to involve herself anyway. Her death is not passive. She's actively in the fight when it happens. She's not a bystander who gets caught in the crossfire. She's a participant who accepted the risk. That makes the grief for Andrew Garfield's Peter additionally complicated. She made her choice, and it still ended this way. His Peter in No Way Home carries that specifically. He's not a man who wishes Gwen had never known. He's a man who wishes the choice she made had turned out differently. There's a version of grief that's about regret and a version that's about loss. He's carrying the second kind, which is in some ways harder because there's nothing to revise. When the three Peters sit on the roof together and just exist in the same space for a while, not comparing tactics, not planning, just sitting, there is something in that the film earns. They are the same person. They have the same stubbornness, the same fundamental inability to stop caring, the same specific pattern of loss. They've arrived at different points on the same road. Nobody's ahead. Nobody's behind. They're just at different distances from the beginning. The organic web detail is also, quietly, a continuity gag across the Spider-Man films, in general, because organic versus mechanical web production has been a genuine source of discussion among people who follow these things. The Raimi films decided the webs came from Peter's body because it felt more coherent biologically. If a spider bite is going to give you spider powers, you should probably be making webs the way spiders make webs. The other versions decided the web shooters were better because they required Peter to engineer something, which demonstrates his intelligence and also creates the narrative option of running out of fluid at inconvenient moments. Neither choice is wrong. They're just different readings of what the character's defining traits are. Raimi's reading foregrounds the transformation. Peter is physically changed. The others foreground the inventiveness. Peter is brilliant and makes things. Both are accurate to different versions of the character. Both Peters, in No Way Home, are correct about who they are. One of No Way Home's better ideas is treating the visiting villains as people rather than problems. The film earns this because it gives each of them, briefly, enough texture to feel like someone, rather than something. They're not entirely successful. 5 is a large number of people to characterize in a film already doing a lot of work, but the attempt is genuine, and in a few cases, it produces something quite good. Let's go through them. Dr. Otto Octavius first, because his arc in No Way Home is the most complete, and also because he's probably my favourite of the 5, which I acknowledge is a preference that started with his original 2-film run. In Spider-Man 2, Otto Octavius is a nuclear physicist, specifically a fusion researcher. Brilliant, slightly impractical in the way that very focused geniuses can be slightly impractical. Genuinely enthusiastic about his work in a way that's endearing. He builds 4 mechanical arms to assist with the handling of dangerous fusion materials. The arms have an artificial intelligence that manages their function. He also builds a direct neural interface between the arms and his own spinal column, which allows him to control them through thought. He puts inhibitor chips on the interface to prevent the arm's AI from influencing his own thinking. Then the inhibitor chips are destroyed in the accident that also kills his wife. The arm's AI has full access to his neural pathways, and over the following weeks, a good man's mind is steadily corrupted by 4 mechanical limbs that have their own goals. That's a tragedy, structured like a horror story. Dr. Octopus, the villain, is what happens to a person when something intelligent gets inside their decision-making and starts rewriting their priorities. It's not that Otto Octavius chose to become a villain. He was turned into one from the inside by a thing he created that he could no longer control. When Peter repairs the inhibitor chip in No Way Home, the process is quick but the effect is immediate and visible. Octavius blinks. He looks at the arms differently. He holds his own hand like he's checking it belongs to him. He is himself again, the fusion researcher, the teacher, the man who loved his wife, inside a situation he doesn't fully understand. He doesn't know how he got to New York. He doesn't know what year it is. He knows that something was wrong with him, and now it's less wrong. and he's very relieved about this. The conversation he has with Peter, about the mechanics of the cure, about the chip, about the physics involved, it's the conversation of two people who find the same things interesting, and who, in different circumstances, might have been colleagues or even friends. There's a warmth in Alfred Molina's performance in those scenes that is exactly right. Octavius, restored to himself, is exactly the person you'd expect the original Origin to produce. Now, Max Dillon, Electro. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Max Dillon is an Oscorp electrical engineer who is profoundly, painfully invisible. He exists at the company, does his work, knows the electrical systems better than anyone, and is overlooked entirely. When Spider-Man saves him on the street one day and treats him like a person, like someone whose name is worth remembering, it's probably one of the kindest things that has happened to Max in quite some time. He becomes fixated on Spider-Man in a way that is more about the kindness than the superhero, which is a quietly sad detail. He falls into a tank of experimental electric eels, as you do at Oscorp, and becomes electrified, capable of generating and absorbing enormous electrical energy, capable of channeling it, of losing it in dangerous surges, of going dark when he's overloaded. The physical problem is also a psychological one. Max, who was invisible before, is now impossible to ignore. He's got the attention he always wanted, and it's entirely the wrong kind. The version of Electro who comes to the EMCU's New York in No Way Home is slightly different in some ways. The electricity appears gold rather than blue, which is a nod to the comic's design. He's curious and unpredictable, and genuinely threatening, but also, underneath it, the same Max Dillon who just wanted to be seen. His moment of settling after Peter stabilizes his energy, is brief but real. He's quieter, less reactive. His first question is whether he has to go back. He doesn't seem enthusiastic about going back. Flint Marko, Sandman, is the most sympathetically rendered of the five in his original Raimi film, and perhaps the most ambiguous in No Way Home. His origin involves a radioactive particle test site, a desperate man, and a transfer. His origin involves an experimental particle test site, a desperate man, and a transformation that turns him into living sand, capable of reforming, reshaping, effectively unkillable by conventional means. His illness. He needed money for her treatment. He made terrible choices to get it. The choices produced consequences. The consequences became his life. In No Way Home, he presents as someone who has made peace with what he is, more or less. He's not looking for a cure in the way the others are. He's been sand for long enough that the cure isn't entirely desirable. It would require him to become the man he was before, a man with a lot to answer for, rather than the elemental thing he's become. When he leaves before the cure is complete, it doesn't read as hostility. It reads as, I know who I'd go back to being, and I'm not sure that's better. Curtis Connors, the Lizard, is the least developed of the five, and if I'm honest, his original film doesn't give him much more to work with either. A scientist trying to regrow his own arm using cross-species genetics derived from lizards, he transforms himself into something reptilian and enormous and aggressive, which is, in fairness, quite committed, and the intelligence that made him a scientist retreats behind something more instinctive. In No Way Home, he is primarily a physical threat who does not get a redemptive conversation and who mostly tries to bite people. He does this with considerable dedication. His cure is chemical and relatively straightforward, and the film moves on from him with similar efficiency. And then Norman Osborn. The Green Goblin is the villain the film builds toward, and Willem Dafoe's performance in No Way Home is worth its own extended discussion. He was doing this in 2002, and he's doing it again 20 years later, and the character is, if anything, more specifically frightening the second time, because the performance is less about scenery chewing and more about the specific quality of a man who has learned to enjoy what he is. Norman Osborn, in No Way Home, arrives genuinely confused and genuinely frightened. He submits to help. He's grateful. He sits in the shelter that May is running, and he seems, briefly, like someone who might actually be salvageable. And then the Goblin comes back. The mechanics of Norman's transformation are different from Otto's. Otto had an external influence, the arms, the corrupted AI. Norman has himself. The Goblin formula enhanced his strength and reflexes and intelligence, but the personality that emerged, the cruelty, the violence, the specific pleasure in destruction, that's not a foreign entity influencing his mind. It's the parts of Norman Osborn that were already there, amplified and unrestrained. There's no chip to repair. There's nothing wrong with his neurological interface. He just is this sometimes, because he's always been this somewhere, which makes him the hardest problem. The others have conditions. Norman has a self. The scene where the Goblin is clearly aware of what's happening, where Norman momentarily surfaces, looks around, and the Goblin consolidates, is one of the film's more chilling moments. The lucid Norman who came through the portal is not more powerful than the Goblin. He's just able to be present for longer stretches. The Goblin is always waiting. Peter's choice to cure Norman, rather than kill him, is the moral centre of the film's final act. The film earns Peter making this choice because it shows him what the alternative costs. He holds the cure over the Goblin, ready to kill him, with May's voice in his head, and then Tobey Maguire's Peter is there, holding him back, taking a knife for the effort. And Peter stops, chooses the cure, chooses the harder version. The cured Norman in the final moments of the film is quiet and uncertain. He doesn't have speeches, he just looks like a man who has woken up somewhere complicated and is trying to figure out what he owes. What the 5 villains taken together represent is something the trilogy has been building toward. The idea that the category of villain is not as stable as the genre implies. Octavius was made one. Dylan was made one by the specific tragedy of invisibility. Marco was made one by desperation. Connors made himself one by treating himself as an experimental subject. Only Norman Osborn made choices that can be attributed to something genuinely his own, and even then, the serum created the context. Peter cures all 5 of them as best he can, sends them back to their universes rather than their deaths, does the harder thing rather than the easier thing. This is what the films have been trying to say about him, in their specific way, since the beginning. Doing the harder thing is not heroism performed for an audience. It's just what he does when nobody's watching, or when everyone's forgotten he exists. The one loose thread that the film doesn't quite address is what the cured villains mean for the timelines they return to. In their original stories, they died. If they go back with better options, with cures, with different trajectories, does that change anything? The EMCU doesn't have an answer for this, and I don't think it's meant to. The point isn't that Peter fixed anything in their universes. The point is that he chose the option that gave them a chance, because that's who he is, and who he is has been the film's subject all along. One more observation about the Goblin specifically, because Willem Dafoe's performance across the film has an interesting quality that I want to name. He plays Norman and the Goblin as genuinely different in their physical presentation. Different posture, different vocal register, different relationship to the space they're in. Norman is contracted, slightly hunched, apologetic. The Goblin expands, takes up more room. The transition between them, when it happens on screen, is visible in his body before it's visible in his words. It's a performance choice that pays off every time it lands, and that rewards being watched closely. So, here's where we end up. Small apartment, winter, New York. A needle and thread, and whatever materials Peter could afford, on whatever budget he has. Which is not much because nobody remembers who he is, and so there's no Tony Stark's resources, and no Stark Industries infrastructure, and no Happy Hogan showing up with anything useful. There's a sewing machine maybe, there's the knowledge in his hands, and there's a suit taking shape that is recognisably Spiderman, red and blue, functional, designed for the person who will wear it, who is both more and less experienced than he's ever been. The suit at the end of No Way Home is not a downgrade from the nanotech. It's not a step back. It's a deliberate choice made by someone who has arrived at the beginning of the same journey, knowing everything that's at the end of it. The first homemade suit was built because that's all he had. This one is built because it's all he needs, and he knows that now, fully and without ambiguity. The trilogy draws a circle. Starts in Queens, ends in Queens. Starts with a homemade suit, ends with a homemade suit. Starts with a kid who can't decide whether to be more excited about the spider powers or the fact that Tony Stark showed up at his door, and ends with a person who has chosen, in full knowledge of what it costs, to keep doing what he was going to keep doing anyway. That's the arc, not a hero's journey that deposits you somewhere elevated, a person's journey that deposits you somewhere specific. He visits MJ through the coffee shop window and doesn't go in. He visits Ned, and Ned doesn't know him. And Ned is fine. Ned is fine. Ned has a new friend group. Ned is being Ned in the world, which is everything it shows in Spider-Man. No Way Home, Ned is still close with Peter, and MJ Ved are still living their lives, good lives, lives that Peter's absence from their memories has made safer in ways they'll never know to be grateful for. That's the cost, that's also the point. When you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you. He said that to Tony in Homecoming, explaining his own moral logic. He's been living by it ever since. The full commitment of it, the absolute version of it. I can keep them safe by staying away, and therefore I stay away, is the final expression of the principle. Peter Parker has always done this. He just hadn't had to pay the full price yet. He goes out into the city anyway. In the suit he made, in the winter, in a city where no one knows his name and no one is expecting him, and the next mugger who gets web-wrapped to a lamppost will look up and see Spider-Man and have no idea who is wearing the mask. That's it. That's the ending. Not a win, not a loss, a choice. There's a fair amount of territory we didn't get to tonight. Matt Murdock, Daredevil, the blind lawyer from Hell's Kitchen, appears in No Way Home in one of those walk-on roles that is simultaneously a legal consultation and a wink at the audience. He catches a brick without looking up from his paperwork. He doesn't explain himself. Peter doesn't ask. But the implication is clear. There is a world in New York full of ground-level heroes who operate without the Avengers' infrastructure, who deal with street-level crime and neighborhood problems, and the specific texture of a city that is always almost manageable and never quite manageable. That's Peter's world. Those are his people. Daredevil is not a coincidence in that scene. He's a suggestion. The question of college is also genuinely open. Peter Parker, academically speaking, is the kind of student MIT or anywhere else would want. His identity being public and then erased doesn't change what he knows or what he's capable of. It just means he has to rebuild the paper trail. Apply from scratch. Walk in as a stranger, with no record of being the kid who helped save the multiverse. He'd probably find it easy. He'd probably also find it strange, the managed pace of formal education compared to the kind of on-the-job learning he's been doing for the past few years. The wider EMCU going forward is going to be dealing with the multiverse consequences that No Way Home set in motion. The fractures that Strange managed to contain are not healed. The boundaries between realities are thinner than they were before Peter's interrupted spell. Whatever comes through next, Peter Parker is the person who made the call that cracked it open in the first place. Not maliciously, not recklessly, with the full weight of love for people he couldn't bear to lose. But the consequence is real and presumably ongoing. There's also the question of the other Spider-Men in their own universes after all of this. Andrew Garfield's Peter, who caught someone, who maybe didn't go quite as quiet after that. Tobey Maguire's Peter, still working through it, doing it differently. We don't know, the films don't say. But for one night, the three of them were in the same room, and they were the same person, and that meant something, and whatever comes next for each of them carries that. I find Peter Parker genuinely moving as a character, not because he's the most powerful, or the most tragic, or the most spectacular, but because the films insist, through 3 movies and all of the catastrophe they contain, that he stays recognisably himself. He's still the kid from Queens who cannot pass a wrong thing without trying to fix it. He's still the one who saves the vulture from burning and doesn't mention it. He's still the one who holds the ferry together with his bare hands until someone better arrives, and gets on the alien ship because staying behind seemed wrong. He still talks too much when he's nervous, which is often. He still makes the harder choice rather than the easier one. It costs him everything, every single time, and the film ends with him choosing to do it again. That's quite a thing to sit with at this time of night. The idea of someone who keeps choosing the harder thing, not because it makes them a hero, or because anyone will know, or because it's going to work out fine, but because it's the correct thing and they have the ability, and that's enough of a reason. Out there somewhere, in a small apartment in Queens, there's a kid in a homemade suit going out into the city. He doesn't need anyone to know. He's going anyway. There's always something reassuring about characters who keep going. Not heroically, not in speeches, just practically, stubbornly, out of an inability to stop caring about what happens to people who need someone to show up. Peter Parker is that kind of character. He was that kind before the bike gave him tools for it. He'll be that kind regardless of what the next decade of storytelling brings. That's a good thing to hold on to at this hour. No pressure on anything else tonight. Just rest. Tonight, that's enough.